Welcome to another episode of Think Chatbot. This is our 11th episode, I believe, if my maths or my counting is correct. And if you haven't seen the episodes before, this is where a couple guys from ubisend try and build a chatbot in about 45 minutes to an hour. The use cases for each chatbot does vary. Sometimes there'll be things we thought of in-house. Sometimes there might be something that a client submitted, or maybe even something that a member of the live audience has come up with and just wants to see us run through and see how we kind of build that chatbot in quite a short time frame. As well with it, as I always like to say, hello to everyone that is joining in with the live audience. And I know you might be thinking, I can actually tell from a few of the messages I'm seeing coming in, people are a little bit surprised that it's me doing the main talking in the intro here, because normally Alex is the one that starts off with a nice big friendly welcome. But the last couple of episodes we've been changing around who does the building. So I've been doing a bit more of the building, and Alex has been doing a little bit more of the setting the use cases and managing chat and asking a few questions. And speaking of which, would you like to introduce yourself today, Alex?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Alex. Like Jacob said, I usually do the build, but last week and this week I get to just rest a little bit and see if Jacob has picked up anything from the last, how many do you say? 11th? The last 10 episodes. Hopefully he has. So I'll be monitoring the chat. I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and I'll be chiming in every now and then when Jacob either needs help or I have a question for him, which can be fun.
Fingers crossed I won't need too much help, but yeah, never know when it's me. I can always end up finding help for things that really aren't needed. And as well, also actually, I think we might as well just jump straight in today, because I don't know if you can actually tell by looking at my window, but it's currently snowing quite heavily where we are at the time of recording. And I know I'm going to end up getting distracted by that if we don't jump straight in. So what use case have we got today?
Jacob's like a kitten. So we today, as I'm bringing it up, we'll show it to you in a minute. But basically, we're going to start building a bot that is going to help HR streamline absence reporting across the entire organization. So there's going to be a couple of branches, a couple of different validations that we're going to use, and a couple of different data sources. I believe, Jacob, you've been using the spreadsheet data source again for this one, which is really good because it's a really interesting data source. And like I mentioned last week, I believe, spreadsheets are still very much used by many companies, and I'm sure many of the people attending today still use spreadsheets for many different things. So we'll have a look at all of that. The point of doing all of this is obviously to get an absence report for individual employees and across the entire company, and then We'll also do something a bit different than what we've done before, which is we're going to build a conversation that can sort of repeat upon itself. So this is going to be a conversation that has multiple uses for the person using it. And so we will basically just create something that loops around itself so that people can just continuously use it without having to re-trigger something else, etc. So all interesting things. Sounds good?
Yeah, that all sounds very good to me. Yeah, I think it's quite exciting to have the constantly used conversation where it's kind of going around a little bit. I think it's also quite nice as well to kind of talk about how, obviously, as this can be used for absence reporting, but it's one of those quite flexible conversations and use cases that really can be used for kind of any kind of reporting and streamlining that you need. I think it's going to be best explained if we switch off our cameras and just jump straight into Mirrorball.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'll start monitoring the chat, and I'll answer all of your questions when possible. All right, so here we have the representation of what we're going to build. So as I mentioned, or Jacob's going to build, I'm just going to chill out, basically. So obviously, we're going to try and build a conversation that helps HR streamline absence reporting across the entire organization. So the first thing we're going to do is something around a member of staff asking for absence reports. The chatbot's going to verify if the member of staff, as in the HR staff, wants an absence report for an individual employee or for the entire organization. So as you can see, this is where we'll have our first sort of branching, which is going to be very interesting. So if we do company-wide reports, the chatbot's going to do something slightly different. And if we do individual reports, the chatbot is obviously going to provide some different information as well. Now, the looping aspect of it is happening on the last step of the conversation, where the chatbot is basically going to provide an option for the user to go back to the top and do the same thing again. So if you wanted to see how often John in sales has been absent, and once you've received that information, you might want to figure out how often Leslie in customer service has been absent as well. So you can sort of go through this multiple times. And like I mentioned, the outcomes are there at the bottom of your screen. So super simple. We're going to try and see absence reports for both individual employees and across the business. And then obviously we're going to try and do that repeated use case conversation.
Okay, perfect. So I think that all makes nice and sense to me. I'm going to give it my best shot at creating this conversation. I think it looks like quite a simple conversation to create in quite a few ways, and I am very interested to see. I've got a few ideas of how I'm going to be able to build this kind of looping mechanism, but it'll be interesting to see it play out. Obviously, Alex has kind of given me a brief run through of this conversation, so we've been able to get the data set up, but hasn't kind of run through the exact steps until now. So it's quite nice to see this for the big first time actually up in front of my eyes, nicely laid out. I think, shall I just jump straight into the sandbox and we'll get working? So if you are new to the series, and if you're not new to the series, you'd have heard us say this very many times, but if you're new to the series, what we're looking at the moment is the ubisend CMS. So this is just the dashboard section here. As you can see, it says you do not currently have any metrics selected. And that's because the way we like to do these videos is we basically set up a brand new ubisend account, or a client even. So this is exactly the kind of start that all of our clients would see, or if you join onto the ubisend, there's no information in here currently, and there's not actually been anything put in apart from the data that I mentioned earlier. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight into the conversation builder here and just start making the conversation. I think it'll be great to start off without any further ado. So what you can see here on the screen is just all the default conversations that come with ubisend. So these are all the kind of like the initial ones, that the starter or a nice springboard, you could say. This is everything that we think your chatbot should have, or maybe it's good to have. Obviously you can delete them, edit them, kind of do as you please. So it's kind of very flexible there. But we're just going to start by creating a new conversation. And all this naming and description that you can see here, this is always for internal use. So I'm just going to call this something nice and simple, like absence reports. And then I'll put this conversation is used to, I'll put gather absence reports across the organization. I believe I spelled that correctly. If not, you'll all have to forgive my terrible typing. And now what we've got here is the trigger conversation section. So this basically means when something happens, the conversation starts. So this is where we're going to kind of start to customize it a little bit. And we're going to say, so when a message equals, so this basically means when a user types a message and it equals what I'm going to type here, which is TC11. Now, again, another thing that if you are a repeat viewer, I'm sure I can see, and I'm sure as Alex is monitoring the chat, not the clack there, making up words, but as Alex is monitoring the chat, he's going to hear quite a few people say, we always do this. But so what we're putting here is the message TC11. So this means if a user types TC11, it will trigger this conversation. Obviously, in the real world, it's not going to be TC11. It's going to be something like a frequently asked question, such as, I want an absence report, or I need to pull absence reports, or help me find out if Tom's been off sick, or any of these kind of areas and things. Normally that is what would trigger this conversation. But instead we're just going with TC11 because it makes it really nice and easy to type during the video. So we're going to be jumping back and forth from the demo to show you bits, and it saves me having to type a long sentence out every time. So just every time you see me put TC11, just remember that this is basically lazy writing code for I want to have an absence report.
Yeah, I was answering this question privately to a couple of people who were bringing it up, and one thing I didn't mention to them, which is why I'm stepping in here, is the keyword aspect here is actually quite interesting from a user experience perspective as well, because like we've seen for this particular use case, what we want to use this for is almost like just a feature. So an HR employee might just think, okay, I really need a way for me or my team or anyone on my team to figure out absence without having to go through a whole bunch of reports. It's like logging into the platform, using the filters, exporting the data. Maybe it's in the CSV, all that sort of stuff. It takes time, and it's quite time consuming. Whereas here you can do all of this with one conversation through a bot. So assuming you had this bot as part of your internal HR set of tools that they can use, you actually would every now and then want to create features within that bot that can actually be triggered by just clicking a button. You don't necessarily need to use natural language processing or all of that fancy stuff. If the only thing you need here is a way to quickly log into the bot, click a button, tell the bot a name, and then get an absence report. Super simple. There you can actually use the exact process that Jacob's going through in front of us right now, because it would actually be faster and more efficient to use a keyword aspect rather than all sorts of fancy natural language processing.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes it is almost one of those, just kind of go with the easiest thing for the user, not the most powerful, exciting thing with the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't constantly want to show off how fancy your technology is when it's actually preventing you from performing the task as quickly as it could do.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. And so what I'm going to do now is just click save and just jump straight into the conversation there. So as you can see, this is what happens when it looks like when you've got a new conversation set up. Conversations work on kind of a step-by-step process. So as you can see, you basically scroll down the page, and as you add more steps, they appear just here, and that's basically creating the conversation. So as you can see, it says step 1, an example message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to the old mirror board to make sure I'm not missing anything off. And we've got a member of staff I can't talk today, asks for an absence report, which is basically when the message equals TC11, as we were just talking about earlier. So that step's already happened before, and now they're in the conversation. So the next thing they want is the chatbot's going to ask if it's for an individual employee or for the entire organization. So a bit of pre-qualifying there to make sure it's giving the right information. So let's just jump straight in and start creating that. So I'll rename this step here. This is just for internal use so that you know what we're talking about. And we will put, now as I can't think of a name, we'll just put something nice and short, individual or entire business.
So difficult to type when people are watching. Well,
I know, it's so hard. It's like, the most stressful thing about this. It's not building the chatbots, it's making sure that I'm typing correctly.
Several tens of people are watching you live doing this, and then you know that people will watch the recording, watching you completely mess up a simple word like entire.
Yeah, it's why I'm always worried, nervous about either using my name or your name, because I'm like, I best not mess up spelling Jacob or Alex. But so what I've also done here now is I've just jumped down to the message content. So this is basically where we're going to be putting in the chatbot's response. So we're basically going to, I think this is, as it's reporting, we're going to try and keep this as minimal and as streamlined as possible. No fancy language or anything, because the person doing this, they just want to say, I need this report, give it to me, go. They don't want anything fancy or anything too exciting. So I'm just going to go with, would you like a report for the entire business or an individual employee? I'm always very conscious that the way that I'm writing these sentences might sound a little bit oddly worded, but you'll just have to forgive me for that, for doing this on the fly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add buttons here, essentially. So these are kind of little buttons that the user is going to be able to click to make it nice and easy for them. So I'm going to add an entire business option, hopefully not spelled business wrong. And then I'm going to add an individual employee option. So this means that the user or the member, whether it's a member of HR or maybe even say like a line manager or a director that wants to see, they're going to be able to just choose between these two buttons. So for the entire business, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just write here, entire business. And I'm going to come on to what I'm doing here in just a little second, but I'm going to just kind of get it in place first so I can then talk you through it. And then for individual employee, I'm going to put individual employee. So what I've done here is I've given both of these. So this is what the user sees on the left, and then this is what the chatbot sees on the right when they click this button, essentially. So when a user clicks entire business, the chatbot will see the word entire business. And when the user clicks individual employee, the chatbot's going to see the word individual _ employee. Now, the reason that I've done these differently is because I'm trying to keep into mind about the fact that we want to have this kind of constant looping conversation. So this is going to become a little bit clearer as I go through the conversation, because if you've seen us use post back buttons before, you'll know exactly why we're doing this. But if you're kind of new to the series or just watching this video as the first video, then you might be a little bit unsure. But basically, these on the right here, this acts as a signpost to tell the chatbot what to do. And that's why I've given this one a little underscore here, because we're going to want to make it take a slightly different route after kind of being basically signposted by the user. So I'm going to click save there, and then, so now we've got our first message, and I think the first thing I'm going to do is basically have, we'll set up the entire business side of the conversation first, as that's probably going to be the slightly simpler one. So at this point, the user will click entire business. So we want the next message to basically say entire business report. So that's what we'll name it for internal use. And then we'll just say, yep, when a message equals, and then we'll type entire business. So hopefully this is kind of making sense of what I was talking about earlier. So this is the exact same phrasing as when the user presses the button. So it's then going to trigger this message appearing in front of their eyes. And then we're also going to basically want to put, let's try and have a little think about the best way to phrase this. We'll put there has been, and then we'll put report. And I think we'll do this over a yearly time frame. I believe that's the kind of data that we have. So what I've done here is I've just typed report in these little square brackets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back later on and edit this to make sure that this is a variable that returns different data. So for the time being, we'll just leave it as that to keep it nice and simple. It's a technique that I picked up from you, Alex. I don't believe I've explained it very well, but what I'm going for here is I'm building the skeleton of the conversation, then adding the fun and kind of fancy parts once we've got the skeleton there and it's ready to be fleshed out.
You're doing perfect. One thing, someone asked why you did one button with like words in plain English, as in like entire space business, and the other button with an underscore.
Yeah, of course, that's a very good question, to be fair. So the reason for this is that entire business is triggering this message here, so it's just coming up with entire business, and the reason individual employee is done with the underscore here and is a little bit different, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up a separate conversation outside of this conversation window. Okay. So it's going to be basically look exactly like this, but when a user clicks this button, rather than moving down the conversation flow, they're going to be taken to another conversation within the chatbot. Okay. So what this underscore here, which makes it look a little bit complicated, does is this is going to tell the chatbot to take them to that next conversation, whereas this here is telling them just to take them through within this conversation. Okay. I hope I've answered that question there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, presumably. Well, not presumably. I know the answer to this, but you could do underscores for both buttons, and just have, instead of I wish I could highlight your screen. That's kind of annoying, but you could have when message equals yeah, exactly there. You would just have, you know, entire underscore business, and I think this would work as well. So this would be fine as well, I think. But yeah, just do your thing. I think that the question was valid, is what's the difference between the two, and I think the main difference you explained properly, so that's fine.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think it's one of those, you know, ubisend's a very flexible platform, so it's kind of whatever works for you. So exactly as mentioned, is I could easily put underscore for both of those, but the reason I've kept them separate there is to show that one's within this conversation and the other's going to be taking them to the next conversation, just to kind of make it a little bit easier for the explaining purposes. But yeah, it's you can have them both underscore, not underscore. It's completely up to you there. So what we've got at the moment now, if we just kind of review, is basically the user's going to have chosen entire business and has been shown the fact that they can have the report of how many people or how many absences there's been this year across the entire business. So
should we show this in the demo quickly?
I was just about to, yeah, of course. So what we'll do is we'll type TC11 there. And we'll, as you can see, the admin bot, which is my terrible choice of names. You probably will want to call that something else yourself, but I quite like that one there. So yeah, so this obviously just code there. The user would have typed, I need to get an absence report, or would have clicked, show me absence reports from a section. And then we'll click entire business here. And it'll say there has been a report this year. So once we've finished adding the fancy bits, this is obviously going to change to the actual number of absences.
Very nice.
So if we're just looking at the mirror board here, what we've got is we've kind of gone down to this stage and then we've jumped into the left side. So what we now need to do is kind of add this easy option to repeat for multiple employees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this option, and then I'm going to come on and build this right side of the branch and essentially link them all up. So what we're going to do is jump back into the conversation body and back down to our absence reports. And we'll add another step in the conversation, which is going to be, we'll call this any more reports needed. We'll hit a little question mark there, and we will put, actually, I think I'm going to change how I'm going to do this, is I'm going to make use of the fact that you can send multiple messages within the same part of the conversation, within the same multiple bubbles in quick succession is what I'm trying to say here. So I'm going to click add new. So there's been a report this year, and we'll go with, would you like another absence report? And we'll click question mark, and then we'll again give this the same options that we were talking about earlier. So we will put, actually, again, I think I might change how I phrase this again. Sorry about this, everyone here, as I'm changing my mind quite a few times. But I think what we'll go with, would you like to see reports for individual employees. And we'll put yes, and we will, that's a links button there. So actually that's a good point, which I didn't mention here earlier, but if you haven't seen these sections before, is you also have the option to add a URL button. So this could be a link to a PDF, a link to your website. Not very useful for this conversation here now. Might be useful, say, if you wanted to take people through to a much wider section of the report within wherever the data source originally comes from. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we won't be using those. But so we'll continue with the postback buttons, which is what we used earlier. And I'll just write yes and no. And for yes, I'm going to copy what I was doing earlier. So I'm going to try individual underscore employee, which if you remember is the exact same, hopefully if I've spelled it correctly, the exact same phrasing used in the earlier button when they could choose whether it was for an entire business or for an individual employee. And then for no, we're just going to write no more. And then we will click save. And I think what we'll also do is just to kind of round off this section of the conversation nicely, let's imagine they have clicked no. We'll just kind of put a final message saying, okay, and when a message is sent, that equals no more. And we will, actually, I think I'll change, so I'll change it to no more there. We will click continue, and then we'll just put, okay, let me know if you need anything else. So this is just a nice little way to round up the conversation. And so I believe what we've got here is now the entire left side sorted. So you can go entire business. Would like to see reports for an individual employee? No, thank you. Okay, let me know if you need anything else. So now what we need to do is basically create the right side and then link them up. Is everything making sense so far, Alex?
Yeah, that's good. I think there's been a couple of questions around reformatting messages and how many messages you can have within one bubble and things like that. And so I've been keeping on top of that. Thank you for the questions. I think the general advice I would give around these questions is you want to use as many messages as you can to put your point across, but you want to remain really concise and conversational. So the way that Jacob has written this the second message here on the screen, which is split into two, is quite good because he's answering obviously one part of the question with one bubble and then offering further information or further steps with the second bubble. And that's precisely what you want to do with this type of feature, is split things up so that it looks more natural, it looks easier to read. You obviously want to avoid I mean, I can't really say that because there might be a use case out there in the world to do it, but you might want to avoid like 15 messages in a row sent to the user, 15 like really short messages, would probably annoy quite a lot of people. So you want to find the right balance here, but ultimately there isn't really a limit within the ubisend platform stopping you from doing that. It's more a UX perspective. And so if you build this yourself and you don't really have any UX or marketing or branding or that sort of stuff expertise, it's always good to go and chat to your marketing department or the marketing team that you might be hiring, you might outsource from, because that's the type of stuff that they'll see straight away. Okay, this is too much. This is not enough, or it's too big of a bubble with loads of information into one. So that's the kind of tweaks that you can do from a UX perspective, and I think Jacob showed it quite well here.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. I think it's the main thing to remember about with chatbots is they kind of live around this idea that they make life easier for everybody. So that if you can make life even easier when you're building the conversations, it's even better.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Just had to clear my throat there. Hopefully no one's been listening in with quite loud headphones on then, because I know that's never the most pleasant thing to hear. But yeah, so as I said, so what we're going to do is set up the next part of the conversation. So if you remember, I mentioned that this individual underscore employee here is going to signpost the chatbot to take users to a different conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and set up the conversation that triggers off this signpost. So we're going to go back into the main part of the conversation builder and we'll create a new conversation and we'll call this individual employee absence report. And we'll just go again with this conversation generates absence reports for individual employees. And then we'll go with if a message is sent that equals, and we'll just copy in our little signpost here. So hopefully this is making a bit more sense now, that when a user clicks this button, it's going to tell the chatbot to look for the conversation with individual employee as the trigger and trigger that conversation. So we'll click save. And again, just like you saw earlier, we've got a brand new conversation loaded up and we're going to be able to edit it. So what we'll do is we'll edit it step 1, and this time it's going to be basically asking what is the employee's name, so we can give the report. So we'll go with employee name, question mark. And we'll go down to message content to write a little bit. For an individual, my typing's going everywhere.
It's happening again. People are making fun of you in the chat, by the way. Just see if you wanted a bit of additional pressure.
Sorry about that. My throat's just playing up a little bit as well. It's both my typing and my talking now. It's I'm falling apart here on live for all of the viewers to watch and see. Who would you like a report for? So basically we just said we can generate an absence report for an individual employee. Who would you like a report for? So what the user is going to do is they're going to then respond to this with a name, and the chatbot's then going to give the name. So we'll put individual employee report. Message is sent. Actually, we'll keep this as when a message is sent, because this basically just means when they reply. So names can obviously be kind of anything. So you can have quite complex names or quite simple names. So this is probably the easiest way to move on to the next part of the conversation. And we'll put they have had, and then we'll put report this year. So I'm just going to have to clear my throat again there, everybody. I'm very sorry. It appears that I have not used to doing this much talking with the constant working from home, so it's taking its toll on me here.
Someone's asking about using other things than names to put out this information. So absolutely, you could do other things than that. So this could be done based on employee number, employee email address, all that sort of stuff. I guess that would be the two main things. I presume that Jacob's going to do something around names here, where he'll send, I don't know, John or something, and then he's gonna bring up a report, which is good for the purpose of this demo. But obviously, in real life, you might have 14 Johns in your company. So who would that be? So to circumvent that, you could actually use, like I said, employee numbers, which could also be very good for anonymizing the report, because maybe your boss is going to tell you to bring out the report for employee number 1473, and it may not be relevant for the person pulling this report to actually know who that person actually is, and so you can circumvent that through that kind of process. The good thing about this is, if you, like Jacob mentioned, which I think is why some people were asking about this, names cannot really be validated. I could be Alex, which is a fairly common name, but I could be a name that's completely not common at all, or with a really weird spelling, or anything like that. So we can't really do any validation from the ubisend platform perspective. But if you use email addresses, we can validate that. If you use employee numbers, we can validate that as well. So you can prevent, obviously, failure of running this whole conversation. And you can make sure that the conversation actually goes smoothly, and you pull out the right report, and not John A when it's actually John C that you were looking for.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really worthwhile point to make, that obviously I will be using names for the sake of the demo, just to kind of make things nice and easy to understand. But in a kind of real world example, you're probably going to want to use something else. And obviously with ubisend, we've got hundreds of thousands, well, not hundreds of thousands, but definitely into the hundreds of different ways you can trigger conversations. So it's really flexible in terms of how you actually want to do things yourself. But so what I'll do here is, I think, I'll just have a little recap. So they've had report this year. We'll do what we did earlier as well, where we will add another bubble. And this is where we're going to recreate this kind of looping step here. So we'll go with, would you like me to generate another report? And we'll do the exact same things that we did earlier. So we'll just change this to an action, and we'll put yes. No, we won't. We will. I always forget that I need to click add postback button, but we will click yes and no. And for no, we'll just put no more. And for yes, we'll put individual employee, which, have I still got it copied? I do indeed. So this is the same trigger for the conversation. So when a user clicks yes, it's going to tell the chatbot individual employee, which will essentially loop them from this step back up to this step, and then the chatbot will respond with, I can generate an absence report for an individual employee. Who would you like to report for? They can give a name and just kind of continue around this loop if they like. But obviously, you don't want to be stuck in the loop, so we've added the little no there so that they can get out of the loop. And we'll just, again, round this conversation off with no more, and with a message is sent that equals no more. Click continue, and we'll just put something along the lines of, okay, let me know if you need anything else. Create. So what I'll do now is I'll just run you through this side of the conversation in the demo, and then we'll start adding in the data so you can see it actually kind of work in perspective and start pulling through these reports. So we'll go TC11 here. The old admin bot is going to take a little while to think, and then it's going to say, would you like a report for the entire business or an individual employee? We'll go with individual employee. And then it's going to say, I can generate a report for an individual employee. Who would you like a report for? Let's go with a Jack Williams, which is an old friend of mine. And they'll say they've had a report this year. Would you like me to generate another report? We'll click yes, just for the sake of the demo here. And see, as you can see, we've just kind of looped ourselves background in this step. Who would you like to generate the report for? Let's pick another name here, like Murray. And it's just going to continue going around this in this step until I click no, and then I'm out of the loop. Is that all making sense there, Alex?
Yeah, it's great. So what you've basically done is you've created one flow, and at the end of this flow, you basically have the option to completely stop there, or you have the option to go back at the top of this flow and do it again, which is very helpful if you need to go through multiple times, basically the same process, which obviously happens quite often. I can see value in eventually creating combined reports potentially. So you could say, I want Maria and Jack and William or whatever in one query. Obviously, we're not going to do this here because that's a fair bit more complicated, but we could do that to streamline things. Or I could see as well, actually it would be quite a fun tool to build. If you had a small business, let's say 15 employees, you could create a name picker within the bot straight away using fuzzy search. So you would basically be able to input all of the names of your employees and go through this process without having to type their name. So when you click the composer, which is where it says send a message, it would bring the list of all the employees you have at your company, and you'd be able to just point and click instead of having to type and remember Maria's name or Jack's name, which could be quite fun as well. Might be able to do that in another session.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that'd be a really nice example of using this in kind of another session, actually, because I think the fuzzy search, it's really powerful, actually. So yeah, I think we can, this is another great one with the old admin bot generating reports. This is another great example of things that we could do episode after episode of, kind of making it fancier, adding a few new bits here and there. So it really is kind of, I think we'll definitely have to try and keep that on the cards. Do let us know in the chat if this is something you desperately want to see, because then we'll be sure to bring out another video sooner rather than later. But yep, so where was I now? Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to be changing it. So rather than just saying report, it's going to have the nice fun data. Well, not really fun, it's absences, but it's interesting to know. So it's going to pull through the proper data. One thing that we will say is obviously we're using a spreadsheet integration for this for reasons that Alex mentioned at the start. A lot of people still work with spreadsheets. Obviously these spreadsheets are a very powerful and quite universal tool. So it's really good to be able to showcase how you can use a chatbot to pull data from a spreadsheet, but also as well, we're using the spreadsheet to kind of in place of your HRMS, which might already be holding this information. Obviously, you'll just have to imagine every time I say pulling from the spreadsheet, in your shoes, it would be pulling from your HRMS. Really simple to set up those kind of integrations. ubisend has a unlimited integrations policy, so it can connect to pretty much any data source or app, like your kind of HRMS, as long as it has an open API, which I'd say 99% of them do. It's quite rare nowadays that they don't. But as you can see, we've just got uploaded spreadsheets, and in typical Blue Peter sense, which is a British TV program, in case you are from abroad, here's one that we made earlier. So I've added in this spreadsheet, and I've also just added a lookup, which if you are familiar with spreadsheets is a little bit like a VLOOKUP, but the chatbot equivalent. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to be looking through the different kind of absences within the spreadsheet and all the data, and pulling back information based upon this variable variable absence report. So Alex explained this quite well last week, but what a variable is, which is this little kind of curly brackets things here, is where it says report in the conversation with the square brackets, we're going to be replacing it, as you'll see in a second, with these curly brackets and absence report. And what it will be doing is it will be gathering the data and then changing that data depending upon what the user puts in. So essentially, this is kind of code for the user will generate this. So this might become Jack Williams, Laura Robinson. And then when this becomes that, the chatbot's going to search through the spreadsheet for their name or their employee number, however it's inputted, and respond with the correct information. What I'll do is I'll just jump straight into actually making this happen, because I think sometimes it's always nice. Some people learn through listening, some people learn through seeing and showing and doing. So we'll try and get both sides of the viewpoint here. So what I'll do is I'm going to go into the conversation, tell the chatbot to look for the data in this spreadsheet I've added and to use certain variables. So what we'll do is we'll start with the entire business side of the conversation. So this is the one that we were making earlier. So what we're going to do is when a user clicks, so as you can see transitions, and they move on from essentially from this step down to this step, we're going to want to save their message and entire business as a variable to tell the chatbot they're looking for a report on the entire business. So the way that we do that is really simple. As you can see, it's got save variables here, and then we've got the absence report variable that I was talking about. Literally just click and then click save. It really is that simple to kind of add your own custom variables. And now what happens is when the user clicks entire business, the chatbot's going to go, oop, that's a variable. I need to change this depending upon what that variable said. So what we're going to do now is change this to make sure it interacts with the chatbot properly. So this is where the curly brackets that I was talking about earlier came in. We're going to go curly 0.report, because that's the kind of spreadsheet and the way that the data itself is formatted. Obviously, this might look a little bit different to you internally. I've put an accidental space there. For those of you as well wondering what the 0 is, that's essentially developer language for 1. So it's going to return the first thing that matches. I know it's not very handy for it being a 0. It does sometimes look a little bit foreign or a little bit unusual to see a 0 there. But essentially, it's just kind of a really nice, simple way of doing it. You know, it's always putting 0. Once you've kind of done it once or twice, it's in your memory, really easy to use from then on, just kind of a first little initial point. So basically, and then we're going to go into advanced settings, and we're just going to say use spreadsheet values. If you were using your HRMS, you would click use API request response, which is basically tell the chatbot to go and tell your HRMS to give it some data, but we're instead going to tell the chatbot to go tell the spreadsheet to give it the data. And we'll again be using this absence report spreadsheet, and we will obviously be using the absence report lookup because that's what we're interested in. And we're going to click save and then save again. Just a little recap, because I'm a little bit nervous that I'm talking very quickly. When someone clicks entire business, that's going to become a variable. The chatbot's then going to look for entire business in a spreadsheet and return information here where it says 0.report. So let's see this all in action. TC 11, which is essentially, I'd like to see an absence report, or however the user has joined this conversation. We'll click entire business. And then it says there has been 23 authorized and 2 non-authorized this year. That's again my slightly bad wording here. You probably want to jump back into the conversation and say days off or absences. To be fair, we can do that right about now. Just these kind of things, you know, as you're kind of building them live and stuff, you kind of forget to add your English in. Obviously, English is, despite being my first language, sometimes one of my largest troubles. But so we'll put absences this year, just to make it a little bit more grammatically friendly. But again, obviously, this also is quite a good example to show, obviously here I've just been correcting a typo, but say if you did ever have a conversation and you wanted quite a lot of it dramatically changed, this kind of goes to show how easy it is just to go and copy paste, a bit like editing a Word document, essentially. Really easy to change a chatbot's responses. Great for customer service, sales, if a product information changes or the way you do things change, or even obviously with the current coronavirus pandemic that we've experienced, obviously a lot of our clients were finding it really easy to update information for their employees and everyone to access. All right, so I believe this is all somewhat coming to tuition. We'll just jump back to the mirror board. So what we've done is we've gone down this entire left side of the conversation, and the chatbot has successfully provided a company-wide report. What I'll do is I'll just quickly connect it back up to this, and then do the same on the individual side, and what we'll have is a kind of conversation which all loops around itself nicely, and the user is able to kind of go from one side to the other really quite smoothly. So what we'll do is we will just double check that I've added this in correctly, and I realized that I actually did this earlier. So yeah, as it says individual employee, that's already going to start pointing users to the next side of the conversation. I forgot that I already did that earlier, but look at me being nice and organized. That's unlike me. All right, so what we'll do is we'll just do the same for the next side of the conversation, the individual employee report. So what we'll do is we'll basically save this step as a variable. So, because obviously when a user says, the chatbot will say, who would you like a report for? The employee, the HR manager, director, HR agent, whoever it is going to give a name or an employee number. So we want to save that as a variable. So we'll save that as absence report variable. And that is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, going to tell the chatbot what kind of data or where or whose data it should pull within the spreadsheet. So again, we're going to go back down to message content, and we will change this to be the same earlier, which is going to be 0.report. And again, I just honestly, my typing and talking, this is going to be the worst. And they will say they've had however many the chatbot chooses to pull based upon the data this year. And we will click advanced settings, do the exact same. I'm not going to go into it in too much depth, but basically look in the spreadsheet, look for the spreadsheet absence report, pull some absence report data. Obviously, you could have multiple lookups depending. You might want absence report, you might want holiday dates, you might also want, if we kind of step away from the absence kind of example we're using here, you might want this to kind of be a appraisal-based system. How well have they been doing? Have they attended all of their monthly reviews? Have they achieved? Have they met their targets? As we're just using absences here, this was something I wanted to save to the end of the video, but I've ended up talking about it now anyway. But you could really use this for pretty much anything. That really is kind of a simple, flexible conversation that can be tailored to whatever kind of information you need. And what we'll do is we'll click save, which has essentially come to a finish of our conversation, I believe, because now we've added the data into both sides of the branches. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into the demo, see it all in action, just run through it with a couple of different examples. So TC11, in other words, I would like to see some absence reports. What we just did entire business. So actually, I think what we'll do is we'll do entire business again. So we'll click entire business here. There's been 23 authorized and 2 non-authorized absences this year. I wonder who the 2 unauthorized were. Naughty, naughty. And what we'll do is we'll then click yes, because we do want to see the reports for individual employees. So this is now, has taken us to the different side of the conversation. So just a little clarification here. We've gone all the way down this side, we've reached this step, and then we've jumped into the right side without having to kind of do a little bit too much. So then it says, I can generate an absence report for an individual employee. Who would you like a report for? Let's kind of go with, I think we'll go with Jack Williams here, which is just little Jack Williams. See how well he's been doing. They've had 0 days off this year, good old Jack, but I suppose at the time recording it is only February, so you know there's not the world's most amazing attendance so far, but it's still very impressive. And then we also got, would you like me to generate another report? We'll click yes. And it can say, I can generate an absence report for you, for an individual employee. Who would you like a report for? Already I'm noticing as we kind of do this conversation, what it might be quite nice to do is go back in. You could almost say delete this step entirely. So it's just who would you like a report for? As this is reporting, you kind of want to make it as streamlined as possible. So that's something that you can do whether you've had it up from running or whether you're just having to play around, really refining and improving the user experience, a bit like what Alex was speaking about earlier in the video. And we'll just put a different name here. So let's go with something like Katie Jackson. And we'll see how Katie's been doing. So she's had 3 days off this year. Would you like me to generate another report? So as you can see, I believe that kind of somewhat brings this video, or at least the chatbot element side of this video, to a close, as we have essentially pulled absence report for both individual employees and across the business. And we've also created a conversation that allows for repeat uses on both sides of the branches. Is everything made sense today, Alex? I'd like to apologize about my throat dying on me quite a few times.
Well, that was beautiful, perfect. I think you, yeah, I let you crack on because it seemed like you were properly in the zone. I've been answering a bunch of questions, and I'll surface a couple for you, which I think hopefully you have time for. So the first one is around name and last name. So this person was asking if you specifically built this bot, or at least a spreadsheet, to understand first name, last name together, or if you could have just said Katie there, or what was sort of the logic behind that?
Yeah, of course. So the way that this spreadsheet, so basically the way I've falling over my words here, I've chosen this kind of surname, so the full name, Jack Williams and Katie Jackson, is because of how the data within the spreadsheet is formatted. So this has to kind of be somewhat of a close match so your chatbot knows where to look correctly. So say it's kind of, if we did just have Katie, you might have multiple Katies at the business. So you are going to want that second name so to make sure you're pulling the correct information. It kind of falls back somewhat to what Alex was mentioning earlier about how using employee numbers might be a bit more of an efficient, easier way to do this. Obviously as well, using the kind of the first name, surname here, it is completely up to you. How is your data formatted? What's the easiest way and most natural way for your business? If you're quite a small company, maybe just go with first names. Medium-sized company, first name, second name. Very large business, you know, you've got multiple departments, multiple locations, even global. You're probably going to want to be heading down either the email address or the employee number route.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Also just suddenly jumped to my mind here as well is you could kind of further take this conversation a little bit further and also start doing this on a departmental sense. So you could have, say, a branch which is, I'd like to see absences throughout, or maybe not departmental, but locational for this location or this department. And then within that, I want Katie, Jack, and Louise.
Yeah, that's good, because that was going to be one of the questions is how do you make this more relevant for large companies? So I'd say I don't know anything about the person who's asked that question, but I know for a fact that we do tend to attract larger companies using our platform just because of its flexibility and how powerful it is. If you do have a larger company, you might want to do exactly what Jacob just said, and is drill down from a top-down perspective. So company-wide, department-wide, team-wide, etc. So that might help refine the experience a little bit. So that's cool. There was another question around using this use case for something else than HR. So can we what can we use this for other than just this specific use case?
Yeah, well, that's kind of I could be here talking about this all day with that kind of question. It's a very vague response in terms of it's so flexible, it can be used for pretty much anything you need. So if you have something which is kind of a database report or database compiling, it's going to be able to pull that through in the exact same way. So if you say you want to have a look at expense claims, you want to have a look at employee performance, you want to have a look at all of these things, or maybe even say you want to have a look at successful how many applicants have applied for jobs, any kind of this kind of area where it's just kind of looking for a data source, pulling it back through, it's going to be able to do that for you. But obviously as well, don't get too locked up in the idea that this could just be data in terms of raw data, because it's really not that restrained, I should say, either, because it is so flexible. So if I say jump back into the conversation here to make it hopefully make a little bit more sense, but if you were, say, here where we've got this kind of 0-dot report, this could very easily become pulling information on, say, feedback surveys and long form information as well. So you might have what were people's responses to the question 13 in our last survey, and it's going to be able to come back and say there was this response, this response, this response, and there will be quite long form and really make understanding your workforce that little bit easier.
Perfect. I think we can end here. That was great. Thank you very much for your expertise and for showing us around on this build. Do you know what we're building next week? Has anyone piped up about something?
What we're building next week? I do know what we're building next week, but it has just slipped my mind. I believe, I don't want to give away too many spoilers in the lie of trying to make it look like I can remember when I can't, but we're definitely incorporating the fuzzy search that you mentioned earlier on in the video, but I can't remember the exact topic, I'm afraid.
Cool, that's fine. So we'll have a look at that starting on next week as well, just because based on feedback from people attending and emails that I tend to receive from people using our platform, we're going to use this session as a bit more of an open forum. So we'll still come around with a use case every now and then, and we'll very much use the platform ourselves, because both Jacob and I both have projects of building stuff ourselves anyway. But we're going to use this 1 hour session every Tuesday, 1 o'clock UK time, as an open office type policy where you guys can join in, ask questions, and we'll basically just focus on that, because I do realize that I miss a lot of questions, and then I have to go back, and some people just end up emailing me, which I know is a pain for you guys. So from next week onwards, we're going to have a lot less of an involvement into building a very specific use case, and we'll more focus on you guys. So if you have any sort of questions, just bookmark this weekly call in your diary or something, and just join in from next week onwards, and we'll be more than happy to focus on you.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm quite looking forward to the slightly new change of setting. Well, not setting, but change of how we're doing things. I think it'll be really interesting to have a bit more of a conversation flowing, slightly less moving away from the here's the use case and become a little bit more open to everyone in sessions.
Yeah, I think it's a good learning experience. Cool. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jacob. Do you want to say goodbye or any parting words?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, everybody, for attending the video, and thank you yourself for helping me out and monitoring the chat throughout, Alex. Sorry about my throat dying from time to time. So talking isn't always my strong point. But thank you all for attending.
Perfect. Thank you. See you next week.